Hey guys, what is going on? So today marks day one of reclaiming my strength. And this is something that I have been kind of trying to do a couple times over the past several years, but I always just ran into some type of issue, whether it be like vacation or an injury or something like that. And so I think I'm in a perfect spot to do it this time around. And I just started my strength workout day one, and it went pretty well. So basically, the idea behind the next 2 to 3 months is that I'm probably going to be cutting. I do have a wedding, like my wedding, later in the year, and I want to not be fat for that. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable thing, and so I probably will start my cut, a few months prior to that to make sure that I get lean. And so, knowing that, I definitely want to be hitting some numbers now before I don't have the chance to hit them for a while, because I will probably hit some big numbers, whether they're PRs or not, remains to be seen, but hit some big numbers, then I'll go on my cut and then I'll start another bulk. And then that's when I'm going to go for the crazy PRs, the, 500-pound bench and stuff like that, that I think is on the table for next bulk. But I think this period, the next 2 to 3 months, is going to be revealing on if 500 is in the cards for potentially end of 2026, maybe early 2027, or if it's further out than that. And that would be something that I'll figure out along the way. So I'm just kind of doing this myself. I have a lot of experience doing my own strength programming. I would say that's my number one strength in terms of like not only doing my own programming, but I think in terms of like programming for other people. I've been doing some online coaching over the past couple of months, and I feel like it's going well. But I would say that my primary skill set is just kind of unlocking a little bit of strength from muscle that we already have. Now, building muscle, I would say that's kind of the long term game plan, and it's very hard psychologically to commit to building muscle over strength, because I think strength is a very big like dopamine rush, and you want to hit a big number and everything like that. And I would say that was me in my younger years. I really just want to hit PR, 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 and I think I held myself back by allocating so much of my effort towards that as opposed to just like building muscle. And so the last 4 or 5 years, outside of some roadblocks, I think I have dedicated myself very well to building muscle mass. And I'm really excited to see where that newfound muscle mass is going to take me. I think, for example, I've been working on my arms a lot, primarily triceps, but just arms in general. So my arms are quite a bit bigger than back when I was benching like 400 plus. My chest seems to have really gotten a lot better this bulk in particular. I feel like I've just taken my chest to another level. So not only is my chest bigger, but I have a ton of momentum in terms of building chest, where going into my next bulk, obviously bench press and stuff like that is a chest exercise. So being able to hit a 500-pound bench, I always felt like, hey, I just have to get, bigger arms, sure, but got to get a bigger chest. And I think both of those things have come along really well. And I'm very confident going into next bulk, I'm going to be able to continue to build that chest up at a much faster rate than I've historically done. And I think that'll be probably the key. Now triceps, they're just stubborn and they continue to be stubborn, but it's been a steady gain train for those. It's just been much slower than I'd like, but that's what happens with genetic weak points. It just takes a lot more work. So I've definitely grown my triceps a lot over the past 5 years. It's just that's a lot for me, maybe not a lot for other people. So probably still a weak point, both in terms of like size as well as strength, but I think it's a much better spot than it was back when I was, again, still benching 400 plus. The one area, and also my back is probably holistically, I would say definitely my lats, but my back overall, I would say is the biggest it's ever been. So that's a good spot to be in. Now, my shoulders are the one thing that I have really neglected, and I've done this historically because shoulders are my easiest body part to grow. So I've just never really cared that much for growing them or for doing like a ton of shoulder pressing. In this bulk, I really tried to be consistent with like seated overhead press, and these are on the Smith machines, but seated overhead press and behind the neck press. And I've just found, I don't know if it's just this is a personal thing or what. In theory, it always seemed like the seated versions, especially the Smith machines, would be better for hypertrophy. But I've kind of noticed that my shoulders, even after like a year of consistent shoulder pressing, they just don't seem to be as big or as strong as they were back when I was just doing like standard overhead press, like standing. So that's something that I'm going to experiment with over the next 2 to 3 months is doing more overhead pressing, more standing overhead pressing. I'm going to be doing actual normal barbell bench. And I actually have done these things like today I already did all this stuff. So doing standard overhead press, I think that's something that has a lot of potential for growth considering, again, my shoulders are my genetic best body part. I feel like if I actually apply myself and be consistent with standing overhead press, I should hit, potentially, if not, this bulk, because I only have maybe 3 months max to hit it. But I think a 315 strict press is in the cards, the not too distant future. That's probably going to happen before a 500-pound bench. So I think that's something that could be exciting. And I think, again, just applying myself is going to get me there. My dips are finally, I haven't updated on here, but my dips have always lagged behind like previous bench numbers that I've hit. I've never been good at dips. And just recently, over the past couple of months, my dip numbers have started to eclipse anything I've ever done on bench. And these are like full ROM paused, like, real dips, not like, street style. And so some people, they say, this is my dip form, this is my dip form. My dip form, I would say, is pretty strict and deep ROM and everything like that. So I'm just, trying to apply apples to apples there. But now, yeah, my dip numbers are quite a bit above what I've ever hit on bench. And, these are paused too. So that tells me that like my triceps and my lower chest are like coming up quite a bit. And so I'm just going to continue to keep dips in the program. The only thing is that as opposed to doing like the super like narrow grip, like super deep, I'm just turning the handles out and going a little bit more chest to mimic a little bit more of like a bench press. And so I want there to be a little bit more specificity there. So today I hit, and I can throw some numbers up. I did these earlier today, but I did 135, so 3 plates, 345-pound plates, plus my body weight, which today was like 251, 252. I combine, those combined is like 380 something, I think. So I did that for 6, and it was like a pretty, like not too hard 6, especially because I don't do that wide grip form too much. So yeah, if I can hit, let's say, that wider grip style, where I'm doing like, let's say 400 total weight for a set of 10, I feel like that should be, pretty close to the foundation for a 500-pound bench. Now, obviously, I still need to get my actual like horizontal pressing up to par. I need to get my vertical pressing up to par. But as far as taking care of that part of the equation, I think that's there. The next thing is, my bench press today they were like kind of like in my head, they were pauses. And I've run into this issue before where I don't commit to either pausing my benches or doing touch and go. So I do this awkward in between. So they look like touch and go on video, but they're harder than touch and go. So it's just kind of, in the future, I'll just try and pick one. I'll either do a pause PR or a touch and go PR. But today I did 275 for 8. And I have not been benching this whole time. I've been doing dips and I've been doing some camber bar benching, which is just really focusing on a range of motion that's not super applicable to bench press, but it's very good for like developing the pecs, I would say. And so, like when I tried to test my bench numbers a little over a year ago, I think I got 275 for 3. And that I literally tried to get a 4th rep and I couldn't get it. This time around, I did it after my dips. I kind of paused them. And I got 275 for 8. So that's like a better starting point, but at the same time, I should be stronger because I've been doing like pressing, like some variations of pressing. But anyway, we'll see where that number goes. Like last year or like a year and change ago, I think it was the end of 2024. In 1 week, I think I took my bench from like 275 for 3 to 275 for 8. So like, I don't expect it to be that fast this time around, but yeah, I think I will see fast bench progress. I think I will get to the point where I'm probably hitting, benching 315 for a decent amount of reps. And generally, my rule for me is that 315 for a 10 piece is good for a 405 bench. So I think if I hit that number, I would probably be good there. And yeah, I want to regain a 405 bench, but I would like to hit maybe like, 200 kilos. So maybe like 445. That'd be pretty cool, I guess, for this bulk. But again, the real thing that I'm looking for long term is just getting that 500-pound bench. But it's going to take time. And I know that like my last time around when I tried to rush it, that's when I tweaked my pec tendon. And so this time around, I'm not going to try and rush it as much as I did. And I am starting from a higher baseline. So yeah, those are those numbers. Oh, and I did hit an overhead press, 1 rep max, you could say. It was a pretty easy 1 rep max. But I did 225, which again, if we're going back to that period where I was testing my strength a little over a year ago, I was like leading up into my overhead pressing and then I hit a 225 overhead press. But it actually took me a little bit of time to get acclimated to that. Whereas this was just right off the rip, no programming or anything going into it. So my baseline is just higher. Now, how much of that is because I've been shoulder pressing? How much of that is because I've been doing some type of chest press versus not doing any of it last year? Obviously, some of that. But if that's where my baseline is, hopefully the runway that it's going to take for me to reclaim PRs is not going to be as long. But we'll see. So yeah, dips, all-time PR. I've never had tricep strength or lower chest strength like I have now. So those are like for sure the best they've ever been. And so it really just comes down to regaining that upper part of the chest and the shoulders and like that region. Like all I got to do is get those back up to where they've been. And that should mean PRs. And then if I hit, even better numbers on those, then we're looking at even better PRs. So very excited to see where that goes. Again, probably going to be doing this for about 2-3 months. Then I'll go into a cut and then we'll go back to the bulk and then hopefully hit a 500-pound bench. Again, 315 overhead press maybe is in the cards for this bulk, but I doubt it because I would have to increase my overhead press by like 90 pounds in 3 months, which is just tough. It's possible, but it's tough. But I do think I could probably hit that early in my next bulk. And then, realistically, I want to be hitting, considering I'm generally better at overhead pressing, somewhere close to mid 300s for an overhead press. But that's a bridge we'll cross when we get to it. For now, I do think bench is kind of the one that I'm prioritizing. But I do like doing overhead press. I have found that the standing barbell to me is just a lot more fun. I don't enjoy doing seated overhead press. It's not a fun exercise for me. And that's one thing is I always liked bench because it was fun. And then when I stopped being strong at bench, it stopped being fun. And I find overhead press, even when I'm weak, the standing overhead press is still kind of fun. And so how much of that plays into it, how much you enjoy your workout, it's a pretty big factor. So anyway, all these, talking about pressing, I've done plenty of stuff for my back and everything like that, but I don't have any PRs that I care about with any of these numbers. Like I don't care about my squat. I don't care about my deadlift. I don't care about any, pull-up PRs or anything like that. So I don't really have numbers. And then like a bent over row is just, there's so many different form variations that it doesn't really make sense. But back again is at an all-time high. So this whole idea of like, you can't shoot a cannon out of a canoe. Well, if I have a bigger base to bench off of, or to press off of, or if I'm heavier or anything like that, that should be beneficial for my pressing numbers. So excited to see where we go with that. I think, again, not expecting crazy numbers, but I am expecting to either get close to or potentially surpass my previous numbers that I've done in terms of PRs, which for those of you who don't know, my bench PR is 415. My overhead press PR is 275. Those were after I got COVID. So they were like, I feel like I might have been able to hit more than those if I had a better like peak potentially. And then as far as like rep PRs, I did a 315 bench for 14 reps. It's my PR on that. 315 for 8 incline. I don't really care about incline, so I probably will not be testing that anytime soon. Maybe I will. And then I think I did a 225 overhead press for 9, I think is my PR. So yeah, those rep PRs are with elbow sleeves, but back then my triceps were really weak, so I don't think they really helped that much. This time around, my triceps are stronger. So if I were to wear elbow wraps or not wraps, elbow sleeves, I think I actually would get more out of the elbow sleeves now that my triceps are stronger, but that remains to be seen. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Hopefully a very productive 2, 3 months coming up. And I look forward to posting some PRs, hopefully. If not this bulk, definitely next bulk. So excited for that.